Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with Dave, Julie, and Ed. Jen could not join us here, but she'll be critiquing this episode offline and we'll get her notes. And we have our author with us today. This is Lynn Leonard. Lynn, thank you for coming today.
Welcome.
Lynn is from Rhode Island, and we met her at the Hollyhock Conference in New Bedford a couple of months ago. So Lynn is going to read her story for us. It's a short story submission. It's called Broken Rules. And Lynn will read the story and then we'll do the critique. Thanks.
Carl could hear them now. It must be Monday. Carl's got on the light blue shirt and his gold and blue tie. He had a rule not to let this get under his skin. It was one of the few times they bothered to notice him. He knotted and unknotted the tie 5 times. The day would go well. Wasn't it guaranteed? All the proprieties had been observed. Carl liked the order. He liked the constancy. Carl liked the rules. He pulled into company parking. Doreen's Kia was squatting 2 rows from the main entrance. She's here for less than 6 weeks, and already she's parking like a junior exec. That had to be breaking a company rule or two, Carl noted. Yep, she's got it going on with the boss for sure, he mourned. Delightful Doreen is out of my reach. As he trudged from his 5-year-old Corolla to the distant Technotool door, Carl repeated his ever-present mantra. I can't let this bother me, I can't let this bother me, I can't let this bother me. In his cubicle, there was a post-it on his computer screen summoning him to Lumberg's office. A shiver coursed through his body. What now, he thought. Carl let it go. He had a rule not to borrow trouble. Sit, Carl, sit, sit. A broadly beaming Mr. Lumberg greeted him cordially. The boss was one of those people who smiled with both rows of teeth. I have a favor to ask you. Carl thought, all those big white teeth. His mind dived to a vision of a huge, smooth, sinuous shark shaking a naked Doreen in his powerful jaws. Her red hair undulated in the green seawater like a lovely bloodstain. Carl, are you with me? Lumberg asked with an edge of impatience in his voice. Carl surfaced from his ocean reverie. A favor. Now he's friendly. Could this day be getting worse? Doreen seems to be having a little trouble getting on with her paperwork. Carl, I wonder if you would be the good doobie that we all know you are and help her out. You know, take up some of her slack. The boss cajoled, his shark grin widening, his shark teeth glinting. I would really consider it a personal favor to me, Carl. If Doreen wasn't spending so much time entertaining the boss, she could get her work done herself. Sure, Mr. Lumberg, sure, glad to help. When would you like Doreen and me to get together about this? Carl asked, maybe too quickly, maybe too eagerly. Maybe not all was lost after all. No need for that, Carl. I have all the papers for you to take to your desk to work on for her right here. It would be a personal favor to me. I just bet it would, you son of a bitch, Carl thought. He could feel his face warming. So new Doreen was a special friend to the boss and not such a great worker. It seemed she needed to have more of her time freed up to deal with Mr. Lumberg's needs. And Carl would be the means to do all of this. Oh, she is so pretty, so young, so unattainable, except for rich jerks like Lumberg, Carl seethed to himself. This day did get much worse. But what can Carl do, he pondered. It is Carl's rule to be a good employee. It is Carl's rule to do what he is told. It is Carl's rule not to let things like this bother him. These are Carl's rules from the time Carl was a little boy. He forced a broad smile over his reddening face and replied, sure, Mr. Lumberg, sure, glad to help out the new girl. He spun to go while he could still hold that smile frozen on his face. It was Carl's most important rule never to show how Carl really felt. Why should he bother? Who really cared? Carl, would you mind asking Doreen to come in here? I have some things I have to go over with her, Lumberg ordered. Doreen was already at the door as Carl left. She floated by on a cloud of jasmine and roses. A bump of her buttocks shut the door firmly behind her. There was silence when Carl could hear them laughing as he slunk away. Late that afternoon, Carl hissed under his breath, "I can't let this bother me, I can't let this bother me, I can't let this bother me," as he finished his workload and began to tackle the Doreen assignment that the boss had given him. He was still slaving away as the two left at 5. He watched out the office window while Lumberg shoveled Doreen into his black Beamer convertible and put the top down. Carl felt physical pain as he saw Doreen's pale fingers enmeshed in the light gray-brown curls at the back of Lumberg's neck. Where else? Where else? The thought tortured him. "Why so late?" Both Gary and Phil had inquired with smirks on their faces when they passed his cubicle on their separate ways out. Only Gary took the time to commiserate. "That looks like newbie work to me, Carl," Gary had added with sympathy. "You're kidding me. Doreen's work? I don't believe he's screwing you like that. For that matter, I don't believe he's doing the same thing to the delicious Doreen either. What a waste." Carl would remember that Gary had shown some sincere concern. He made it a rule to remember when people were nice to him, no matter how small the gesture. There was nothing nice to remember for Doreen or the others in the office like Phil. There was not one single nice thing to remember, not one nice thing especially for Mr. Lumberg. As he inputted Doreen's work, he grew angrier and more resentful in a frighteningly global way. All the years of his feeling ignored, of his feeling put upon, all the years of his not letting things bother him, of his swallowing the metal shards of hurt and anger, of, most importantly, never showing how he felt. It all swelled up into a hot, red acid ball of molten misery in his stomach. Carl had to vomit it out. Carl knew what Carl had to do. This time he had to show them how he felt. We're speaking with Gary Spivak, one of the few survivors of the office shooting rampage of Technotool Industries here in the Central Industrial Park in suburban Dayton, Ohio. What can you tell us about Carl Bellman, the alleged shooter who ended the rampage by taking his own life? The reporter had ignored Gary's state of emotional shock. The reporter had kept Gary sequestered from medical personnel so he could get the first-person account of the tragedy. He jabbed his microphone into Gary's ashy, blood-spattered face and hoped the man would speak loudly enough to get a killer soundbite that would be picked up by the network in New York. Carl was always such a quiet man. He kept to himself. I never saw him get angry. I don't understand why he did this. I don't understand. Why am I still alive? He just walked right past me. He gave me the sweetest smile, and then he walked into the boss's office, and he shot Mr. Lumberg and Doreen, and then out into the floor to kill Phil and so many others, dead. I don't understand. What kind of rules does a man like that live by?
Thank you. Thanks for reading. That's quite a story. Now, the version I happen to have is a bit different than what you just read.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why. I thought I had gotten the most recent from you.
I printed out one that I had in my OneDrive, and what I had in my OneDrive wasn't what I sent you.
Okay, that's okay. We can it's still
The sense of it, I think, is
right.
pretty much
The
It's the same
same.
sense. You'll see some different senses in our notes.
Right, that's why I wanted to
Yes.
note this, because there'll be...
After I printed it out, I remembered there was something about when Gary was commiserating with Carl, there was something about it's amazing how much more handsome a man can be when he has a fat wallet.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes,
That's
I
in
like
here.
that. Yes,
That's
yeah.
right. So and I did have, the sentence was a little different the way it started off, but I like the way you got right into the story. I thought that was good. You had kind of a sense of what was going on right away and what kind of person he was. I think I would have wanted to know a little bit more about him and why people were targeting him. Maybe that doesn't matter, but it's just something that I happen to wonder. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be answered.
I think, well,
No, go ahead.
people pick up on somebody who's a little different like Carl is very quickly.
Yep, that's very true.
And that not just kids, but adults will do it too.
Was your objective to get across any kind of a lesson in the story? I'm just curious. Or you just, it's just something you were interested in writing?
Yeah. Just that you never know.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
Yes, it is.
And maybe it's better to be nice to people.
You're here?
Let's back away from this story and use it as a universal.
Yes.
Be nice to people.
I know,
It doesn't
right?
have to be fictional.
Yeah, that's true.
And not just to keep yourself from getting shot, but it's just a good rule anyhow.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And to remember that everyone's a little bit different, and that's okay. So now, I didn't have a lot of comments. I think there's one thing I'd point out just in general in terms of writing, and that is lots of times your narrative will tell you how that person is feeling or behaving, and you don't have to tell the reader because the reader can figure it out based on what the person's saying. And there are several places where I noted that, and this is an easy fix, but I just wanted to point one
Sure.
out. So one is at the bottom of the first page, and it might be a little different in your copy, so I'll read it. But sit, Carl, sit, a broadly beaming Lumberg greeted him cordially. Well, we kind of know it's cordially based on how he's talking, so you don't need to have that. A second one is on the next page where he says, Carl, are you with me here? Lumberg's voice was sharp with impatience. But you could say it was sharp, but we already know it's with impatience because we can tell by the words that he's saying. So there are several instances where that came up where you just don't need
Good
those
point.
words. So I just
Yeah.
pointed them out as you went along.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just wanted to ask the group about, and we've discussed this before in our writers group, is, and it depends on how you want to write, but in most cases, when you say something, and it might have changed, but Carl noted, or Carl responded, or the boss cajoled, that's what happened in this copy. Instead of that, normally people just say said. They don't normally say certain what's the word for it?
Synonyms for.
Right, for said. They just say said, because said is almost supposed to be invisible,
Yeah.
and you're just supposed to be
You
paying
very often
attention.
hear that from agents.
Yes,
that,
we do.
Yeah.
So, and often, whether it's cajoled or whatever the word is, you can again tell by what is being said, so that you can just say said instead of these other descriptors or synonyms. Did you want to?
I'll go last as you, but yes, these people are much better at the very fine details. I am not, so I'll go last
All right.
and pull up my shotgun and take care of.
I guess I was just trying to make Mr. Lumberg look as bad as possible.
Well, and I think that's a problem, because what you've got here is straight line to tragedy. You start with a miserable individual. I thought he was autistic with the rules and just organizing it. So right away he has a problem. Then he gets mistreated, and he gets angry, and then he kills everybody. That's a straight line. I'll do it this way. It's a straight line to misery. And it really doesn't add anything to the dramatic effect of literature. Back up a long way, and what you find in Shakespearean type tragedies, and I'm not saying it should be Shakespeare, but the protagonist is fighting to do something, just at the very verge of succeeding, everything hits the fan.
Yes, that's what his problem was with Doreen. He thought he might have had a chance with
Well,
her,
do
and
that.
it was taken away from him.
Yes.
Well, you need to put that in, because right from the get-go, he was a loser with Doreen. You have to show him have...
He feels he
because
doesn't have a shot
I got
with her,
no
yeah.
sense that he ever had a chance with Doreen, ever.
When I first wrote the story in its longer form, he felt he did have a chance with her.
But you have to let me feel it. Yeah, you have to let the reader feel. You can't tell me that he had
Yes.
a chance. You have to show them in action. He goes up to her, and she's wavering, and then she accepts, and they have a wonderful
That'd be
time.
a different kind of thing, yeah.
What you need to do is, because again, what we're involved here is a straight line to misery.
Right. You know, when I read this,
That's a lot of work. What I'm saying is, your story needs to be restructured or added to or built up in certain areas. I like the idea of somebody who's miserable, who then, no, I shouldn't
Well, it
say
sounds
that.
like you
No.
were,
Like it.
sounds like you had done that. I mean, what you just said sounds like you had a different version.
And the
where,
other way
where
you
he
can
went into
go
more
at it is
detail.
that we know Carl's a little
Yes.
to begin with,
Right.
and in his own head, he may very well think that he
Maybe a
has a
fantasy.
chance with
Mhm.
Doreen, when that was
Yeah.
never
See, that's something
going
that,
on in
That's
reality.
something that can be very interesting to do in a story, is express it in a way so that the reader can tell that he does not have a chance. But in his mind, he feels like, oh, look, she asked me where the rulers are, and I showed her where the rulers are, and
And they
that
brushed
kind of
elbows
thing.
at the coffee stand. Something,
Right.
something to give us, the reader, a feeling that he had a chance.
Yeah.
plus,
Like when Mr. Lumberg wants Carl to help
Help,
her
right.
with the work, and he gets all excited because he thinks,
Right.
oh,
Wants to
I'm going to get a
interact.
chance to
He
sit
has-
down
Yes.
with Doreen and
He
has a
work with her.
scene in mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
right, but maybe he does get it. And to just tail off of what Dave said, that I knew by the third or fourth sentence max what was going to happen in the story. And I don't, I did.
Well, not
So-
specifically shooting everybody, but.
No, I basically had.
Oh, did you?
I
I
did.
saw that. I didn't
I
see it
did.
coming.
Well, of course, I write about terrorism.
Oh, that's true. That's right. The
So it might be,
proclivities
it's,
there.
right. But I did.
You knew it was coming?
I knew it was coming within 3 or 4 sentences, and that was what bothered me, that I knew what was going to happen. So, and again, I do come at it from that perspective of expecting things like that, but
I'm not that sharp.
I don't.
You're pretty sharp.
So
One thing that I thought would be interesting, and again, you're hearing lots of possible ways to go here, but I thought it might be interesting to see the rules that Carl generates for himself.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
he keeps talking about the rules, but to actually see, okay, here's rule number 451. Don't let comments bother me. And then
yeah.
few
He does say that.
few. But I mean, to actually enumerate them.
To call it Rule
Yeah,
50.
call it
Oh,
out.
you really
Yes.
want to make him.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Let's
And
see
then-
how many times
then
you
a
have to
couple-
wash my hands.
Exactly. Yes.
Right, exactly. And then, so, such and such happens. Rule number is this. And so the reader would start to feel like, oh my God, all the rules that this guy is trying to juggle, in his mind and satisfy, rather than just saying.
Yeah, we had about
that
5
he
of
has
them in there, but
Yeah,
we didn't
exactly.
put numbers to them.
Right.
But, yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was a thought that I had.
And I was wondering. Oh, sorry. It's quick.
Wonder.
I was wondering if there's a way to make the ending more surprising. And I wasn't sure.
Pretty surprising.
Well, it wasn't surprising for me. So
No.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's no different way to do it. It just seems like that's.
Actually, I didn't have to put the coda on.
The rules, I
No,
like that
the
last
coda,
line.
The coda.
I did
where
like- no, I did like the
coda
last
where you
line.
have the reporter. You
Oh, no,
didn't
no, I
need
think that's
that.
crucial.
I liked
think
that. I
that's
liked the
crucial.
last
Oh, did you?
line.
Yes,
I
yes.
wrote that. I thought that was a good last line.
I did ask if this is it in its entirety, and I'm getting from you this is the whole short story. Because the asterisks before that coda, I thought meant, I haven't really written this part yet, but this is the ending. But you're saying this is all. I would like more details. I would like to cut a little bit that Carl, you with me here, and Carl's in his reverie, just a few lines. I made a note. But what I would like to know is his getting to his boss's office. Describe that walk. Does he go past row upon row of cubicles? Is the door closed? Is it open and welcoming? Does he have to go through a secretary? Because that again will tell us how he feels next to this boss, and how easy is it for Doreen to access the
Yeah,
boss's
I like
office.
Yeah.
Maybe that she just breezes in, but he has to go through.
Yeah, this guy's
Right.
every interaction
Gates.
is painful.
Yes.
Yes.
So, the more of that we see, the more of that you show us.
You mean going to the boss's office?
Yes.
When he's doing the killing, or when
No.
No.
On the
No,
top, the
before.
bottom of page 1, You have
When
in
he
his
gets-
cubicle,
When he's
a
first
post-it
called
note,
over.
had a rule not to
Yeah.
borrow trouble, and then sit, Carl,
It's
sit,
one
sit,
line.
sit.
He's
We
in his
don't
office.
know that he's been summoned to, we
Yeah.
don't, well, the
Yes, we
post-it,
do,
we
'cause
do
he
know
got
he's
the
summoned.
post-it.
But I
Right.
want to know how he feels and what it looks like going to that office.
Well, it's an opportunity for the people who he passes by and how
That's
they treat
true.
him.
He can interact
and
with
how they
colleagues.
look at him
Yes.
or
Yes.
how he feels
Yes.
about how they look
The
at
more
him.
you can
Yes.
show us,
Yes.
rather than tell us, the better in these things.
When he got the post-it, his thought was, what now?
Right.
Right.
And Carl let
Is
it
that- is
go.
that enough?
He had a
Right.
rule not to borrow trouble, so
Yeah, is-
obviously
is
he
that-
was not happy about
This
this.
is your story. It may be enough.
Is that enough? What now? And then he may go back over his life and having similar circumstances and how bad those things turned out. In other words, I think you're cutting the story short.
Yes.
You need to add, no, you don't need to do anything. I would suggest
Would be
that you
beneficial.
add, embellish
Yes.
the high points of the story. Get us to feel his frustration. Don't tell us that he's angry all the time.
Right.
Let us see his
exactly.
exchanges.
Thank you.
He's talking to people, and I want to feel what he feels.
It's like when you're watching a
That-
movie,
that's-
they don't say, oh, so-and-so is getting angry. They don't say, so-and-so feels upset. You can tell what's going on. You can see what's happening, and you experience it as they're experiencing it.
If I show you that he's angry, then it's not Carl, because Carl's
No,
Well,
no,
He's
whatever.
main
pressing
rule
it
is
into
that
you.
he
He's
doesn't
internalizing
let
it.
anybody
Right.
see.
He's
Yeah.
repressing
That's just
it.
an
Yes.
example.
Not that.
Yes.
But if you show us him interacting with people and the difficulties that he
Yes.
has, he tries to phrase things a certain way, they twist it around, they make a joke,
In the longer form of the
yeah.
story, that was it.
Oh,
He
that would
he
be-
tried to get people to go out with him on the weekend, and they didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Huh.
and He was upset. Part of the problem with this in this writing group that I'm in is we're supposed to only do 2 pages double space, so everything
Oh,
has to be
goodness.
very
That's
short.
really restrictive.
Wow.
Oh, my.
So
That's
that's-
challenging.
How often do you meet?
We get to read every week. That's one of the reasons it has
2
to be
pages?
2 pages
What
double
if-
space.
yeah, well, we do essentially the same thing, but with 5 or 6 or 7.
Yes.
Whatever, it's not limited to 2 pages. That's
I
cruel.
tried to
That's
draw
really-
as much as I
That's
could in a,
cruel.
in a
Yes.
short space. But
I would put back
I
in-
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay.
I made some notes about certain word choices I might change, but I want Dave to have time.
I'm done.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
For example, Doreen's Kia was squatting. I don't know that her car would be squatting.
It's a little donkey car.
And Lumberg shoveled Doreen into. I want you to find a good, proper word. And I don't have one for you, but just want you to think.
Because
Yes.
she was his little plaything, and he
Yes.
treated her with great disrespect, so he would shovel her into his
I
car.
see. Okay, then keep that.
Maybe conversations around their relationship would help us to understand that.
Yes.
Because I
Thank
thought
you.
that
Yes.
there were a number, there were an item.
So did I.
Yes.
I
I
didn't
said-
see him mistreating her at all.
Right.
And she seemed
You
very
may
willing.
want to, again, there's an opening. The dialogue is important, because that's how we find out. It doesn't have to be Carl, it could be the other 2 guys who hang around. And they can be discussing how badly she treats him, because she's a nice kid, and she's only trying to work her way up, and she's going to be taken advantage of, something like that.
Right.
That could play into Carl's imagination. I mean, he could feel like he is the knight that is going
gonna
to
save her, yeah.
her
Yes,
from
I like that.
the
That's-
evil Mr. Lumberg's
You get that
clutches
feeling when
and,
Mr. Lumberg is the shark shaking the naked Doreen
Yes.
in his jaws.
Or I like that line. The boss was one of those people who smiled with both rows of teeth.
Yes.
That was great.
good.
That was a great line.
On the last page, it says Carl became angrier and more resentful. I might choose one. And then in the same sentence, in an overwhelmingly and global way. I thought that was
I changed
too
that.
strongly worded. But when you said, and I think you didn't read it this time, wished the man would speak loudly enough for him to get a killer soundbite, that was clever.
Ba-doom.
That was a good use of vocab, because it has 2 meanings.
It's every
So-
reporter's dream.
Yes, absolutely.
Send it in, get it to New York.
I would also just, when you're writing and you're thinking about your scene, I mean, I always picture everything in No, well, obviously you picture it in your head when you're reading it, but I also picture things in my head when I'm writing. And in the scene where he's in the office with his boss, and his boss says, and Carl starts a long monologue, I just bet you do, you son of a bitch. And he goes on and on. I think you need to break that up, because by the time you're done listening to Carl think to himself, you forget that he's in the office. And you kind of lose the flow of where he's at. So I don't think he can go into too long a monologue while he's sitting with his boss before you lose where he's at.
Or maybe his thoughts keep getting cut off.
And while you're talking
Maybe.
about his
Maybe he
thoughts,
starts-
do you all italicize?
Yeah, italicize. I
we
wrote that
suggest that
down.
you italicize when he's
Yeah,
thinking.
thoughts.
so
I'm
that- we suggest you italicize when he's thinking.
Thoughts,
So that
yeah.
differentiates it from the regular text and from dialogue.
From
I
dialogue.
wrote that
Oh,
down.
that's a good idea.
So I made a note,
That
and
could
Sue
be
Just so you
actually
can
changed
tell.
it. Yeah.
I actually
Yeah.
changed
That
it.
helps the reader. Great.
So when you go through our notes, you'll see that any of these little details, that we wrote them in here with notes. And you can look at that.
Is that what you usually do when
Yes.
people's thoughts you italicize?
Very often, yeah.
Yeah, quotation marks are for spoken words out
Yeah.
loud. And every person who speaks gets a new paragraph.
Yeah.
So you're never mixed up. If you don't do it that way, the reader's saying, who's talking? And anytime a reader is confused, the story gets garbled.
Yeah.
So,
Derail.
I know that was a big point you made with that poor lady
yeah.
at Hall.
Oh, and that was, I held back. I
She
really,
had never been critiqued.
yeah, she'd never been
Yes.
critiqued. And I think this may be the first time she wrote anything of any length. And she had no idea about punctuation or spelling or
I
the
talked to her
rules.
afterwards and I said, go out and get a good usage book.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
She was
they're
really
terrific.
Advice. Good advice.
So now, before we end the show, do you have any questions you wanted to ask us?
No, I think it was lots of fun and I learned a lot and I really enjoyed being here.
No, thank you for coming.
I'd
We
like to
appreciate
hear
it.
that.
Thank you for
Appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
coming.
My
It's
pleasure.
terrific.
Thanks again.
Okay. Anyone have anything else?
No, we would like to have you flesh this out, though. I'd like to see the additives.
Yeah, send it
Yeah.
to Sue when you've done the
Yes.
revisions.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be interesting.
And then
It
she'll
would
send
be.
it to us.
There's more to it.
Okay. Well, then, thank you for coming
Welcome.
to join us today, and thank you everyone else for joining us for this episode of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time. Keep writing.